Better Call Saul Season 6 Episode 11 has just released on Netflix and AMC, and we get a multi-timeline episode during the events of Breaking Bad and after with Gene to really set up the ending of this fantastic show. In this spoiler review, I'm going to be giving you my recap of Better Call Saul Season 6 Episode 11 entitled Breaking Bad, alongside discussing my general thoughts towards it. But before I get into it, if you want to see more videos on the final episodes of Better Call Saul, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating, subscribing to the channel, and turning on your notifications. Also, feel free to check me out on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Instagram at Cortex Videos, which is all linked in the description below. But without further ado, let's dive into my recap and review for Better Call Saul Season 6 Episode 11. So now that Gene Takovic has got himself back into conning following last week's installment of Nippy, it's clear that after this new episode, there's no slowing down. The new episode, entitled Breaking Bad, begins appropriately with a flashback to a kidnapped Saul Goodman in the back of Walter White and Jesse Pinkman's RV, pleading to be let go. And he says the classic line we eventually hear once the RV stops moving, with Saul shouting, "It wasn't me, it was Ignacio, he's the one." Of course, last week involved Gene and Jeff pulling off a heist that led the former right back into the world of Saul Goodman. And this week, a phone call that we haven't heard yet leads to him doubling down on those actions and pulling off more cons with Jeff and Buddy. It's definitely an appropriately timed episode in its series of parallels, and it leaves us wondering what the consequences will be this time. So let's get into everything that we saw in episode 11 of Better Call Saul Season 6. So after the cold open, we cut back to the black and white post-Breaking Bad world, and we check in on someone we didn't expect to see. We catch up with Francesca, who is now an apartment manager dealing with a couple of stoners. She gets in a car and drives to a phone booth, all while anxious that she's being followed, and even passes an advertisement for lawyer Bill Oakley, who's now a defense attorney and seemingly gone up in the world. And once she arrives at the phone booth at an abandoned gas station, the phone eventually rings and she gets a call from Gene, who's looking for a few updates. In order to get these, she has to first get her money in a nearby envelope that Gene directs her to, and she then proceeds to tell Gene that she's still being followed, that Skylar White's got her deal, and that it's just him and Jesse Pinkman who are left. We know how things turned out with Jesse in El Camino and his journey to freedom, so really it's just Gene who's left now. And as the call continues, he asks her about the different money laundering operations and accounts they had, with her saying that they've all been raided by the feds, so Gene only has those diamonds he took with him and nothing else. At this point, Francesca wants to end the call, but Gene wants to keep talking, and we get some tidbits of info on people we know and those who are not currently present. She tells him that Huel is now back home in New Orleans, which is of course great to hear, that Bill Oakley is a defense attorney as seen on that billboard before, and then to Gene's shock, she reminds him that she did get a phone call from Kim Wexler. She said that she was checking in on her and that his name came up in the conversation, asking if he was still alive. And after Francesca ends the call, this results in him driving to another payphone where he calls the operator and asks to be connected to Palm Coast Sprinklers in Florida, which we're guessing is where Kim Wexler is at, or maybe was at prior to this call. Once he asks to speak with Kim in saying that he believes she works there, the scene cuts to outside of the booth where we can't hear what he says next. What we know is that it clearly doesn't go down well because we see Gene breaking the receiver and eventually smashing the glass on the outside of the phone booth. So whatever he learns here motivates him to go back to the life of crime we see in the rest of the episode. But of course, we have many questions. Did he actually speak to Kim, or what did he learn on that phone call that provoked his angry response? I don't think it's to do with her no longer working there, because it wouldn't have prompted such a violent reaction from him. But it's all about what created this kind of reaction. Did Kim refuse to speak to him, or did she speak to him and let him know her feelings towards what he's done since? We currently don't know, but whatever did happen during that call has set in motion the events that follow, and Kim's involvement is clearly going to be important come the end of this show with however Gene turns out. And when we come to the events that follow, we learn that Gene makes a return to Omaha and revisits Marion and Jeff at their home, and eventually it's also a return to his criminal ways as Saul Goodman. Jeff returns home to find Gene laughing with Marion after he helped her search funny cat videos on her new computer. But Gene is hurrying things along so that he can pull Jeff aside with his new plan. Jeff reminds him that he last said that they were done, but before they toast to being back in business, he asks Jeff to drive a cab shift for him, and we soon see this new scheme unfold. It involves Gene becoming friendly with a rich guy at a bar and getting him drunk, all while Gene himself pretends to drink and instead sucks his cocktails through a tube in his sleeve. Gene then helps the drunken subject into a cab driven by Jeff, and his friend Buddy returns to their house. Once the man has been drugged by the water Jeff gives them on the ride home. Jeff puts tape across their door so Buddy can get in, and once he is in, he takes the victim's wallet and removes all of his IDs and credit cards to take photos of them. He then would look through his files and take further pictures of tax returns and statements, alongside gathering a helpful list of their passwords. And once he leaves the house, he would remove the tape from the front door, making the whole thing a typical con from the intelligent mind of Saul, coming down to identity theft sold for stacks. So new partners have indeed teamed up to perform a new set of crimes, and it only furthers our questions of what Gene heard on that phone call and why it leads him to double down with these schemes. And with us seeing these partners execute cons, it's only right that we get a taste of the past with previous partners that Saul Goodman came in contact with. We get our first Breaking Bad flashback scene, and we learn that not only does this episode act as a reference to Breaking Bad's Better Call Saul episode, but that the flashbacks also take place in a parallel way to it. We follow the cold open with the extended scene of Saul being dragged into the desert by Walter White and Jesse Pinkman. Saul enters the RV and is followed by none other than Walter and Jesse, and he quickly puts together that it's them who cook the blue stuff, and that the man stood in front of him is indeed the famed Heisenberg. Saul pushes them for information on their operation, but Walter and Jesse deny it, and when they try to start the RV and drive them all back, it predictably won't start. A nice reflection, if you will, to the events of 4 days out. So they now have time to kill, and Jesse makes it an opportunity to ask Saul why he was screaming about Lalo before. He's quick to say that he's nobody and changes the subject by prompting Walt to start the RV again. So he's clearly still haunted by that memory of Lalo, and it's becoming clear that all the events pre-Breaking Bad have developments in the events that take place after, mainly in psychological ways. The scene has one more great moment too that comes in the cinematography that's utilised, with us seeing the grave dug for Saul in the desert slowly fade into Gene lying in bed before he receives a new back massager. The shot is one that conveys what we eventually learn at the end, that Saul has made decisions that didn't have to be made. He went the route of crime, and the actions that led to these moments have created a ripple effect of more bad decisions. Something that he and Walter have a lot in common with, and it's exactly why they use an episode titled Breaking Bad with the scenes that are included. And from here, the bad decisions only ramp up. Gene, Jeff and Buddy scam more drunk rich men, and we see shots of Gene slipping the drugs into the water bottles and Jeff selling all the stolen financial data for more money. This repeats and doesn't slow down until the episode's crucial victim at the very end. And things might change once that victim reveals that he's been diagnosed with cancer. But before we get to that victim, we do get another brief flashback scene to the Breaking Bad era events, and we see Saul using that same back massager that Gene just ordered, with Mike paying him a visit at his now redesigned office. Mike is updating him on various clients, and Saul asks him specifically about Heisenberg. Mike tells him that he's a high school chemistry teacher working with a former student, and that he has cancer. He adds that he's in treatment and it doesn't look good for him, alongside the confirmation that Gus doesn't even know about him because he's small in their line of work. Saul knows that Mike is the primary hand of the currently unnamed Gus, but Mike also does work for Saul as a way of gathering intel on the criminals, especially after Saul purchased Dr. Caldera's Black Book. More importantly though, this scene does not go in the opposite direction when it comes to the nature of Saul's initial conversations with Walter White. We know that Gus was already interested in Walter's meth because Gale wouldn't stop talking about it. But as we learn in the concluding moments of this episode, Saul's interest in working with Heisenberg is entirely his own. Mike warned Saul to stay away from him, but he seemed very intrigued by him, even telling Mike himself that Walter's product is the best in the business. So he doesn't listen to Mike's thoughts there and then, and he also doesn't listen to Buddy and Jeff's attempts to tell him he is taking things too far once we come to the scene that follows. That's because during the final scenes, Gene gets a call from Jeff and Buddy, leading him to rush over, and we find out that Buddy couldn't go through with it. He couldn't scam the guy because he learned he has cancer, and he's taking the same pills that his own father takes. Gene is angered by this and argues that he will be dead by the time he realizes he's been conned. Buddy believes they've made enough money to just let this one go, but Gene is hesitant that this goes through. And with Buddy already pulling the tape off the man's front door, it still doesn't stop Gene from doing it himself. He tells Buddy that he's fired and eventually convinces Jeff to drive him back to Cancer Man's house where he will finish the job himself. Jeff tells him that he might be awake since time has passed, but Gene instructs him not to worry and just pick him up in 20 minutes. We transition to the last Breaking Bad scene of this particular episode, and we see Saul walking past Walter White's car and into the high school in what would become the iconic scene from that Breaking Bad episode where Saul Goodman chooses to get involved with Walter. And as he goes through the door, we cut back to Gene breaking the glass of the Cancer Man's door to get inside. So just like the shot of the grave transitioning to Gene lying on the bed, we now know that he has essentially dug his own grave. Even after multiple warnings throughout the show from Chuck, Kim, Mike, and even Jeff. Whether he gets caught or not, he is in a pit of his own making, and I very much doubt that a happy ending is possible. There's no one else to blame but Jimmy and the repeating choices he makes in becoming Saul Goodman. Whether this leads to a return from Kim Wexler is up for question, but it's clear that what he heard on that call has motivated him to go straight back to his repeating poisonous ways. So what are my thoughts of episode 11? Well, I thought this episode was a perfectly executed handling of all of the timelines in use, using both the Breaking Bad events and the Gene timeline to communicate Jimmy's reflective decisions, and what that leads to is something I didn't expect in the context of how they pulled it off. Having Walter and Jesse back could have just led to fan service, but they chose a brilliant moment to showcase how Saul made made a decision that would lead to where he is today, and then the decision he makes at the end of this episode is one that stresses there being quite the consequences to come too. The further teases of Kim and the ideas that these final 2 episodes will leave us on get me incredibly excited to see the outcome. Thomas Schnoes did a great job of directing once again, with his use of masterful cinematography and editing across the different timelines, telling us this story in a very straightforward way. I can't wait to see where this will lead and why Saul reacted the way he did to that phone call with Kim, and I expect we'll see even more cutting between these 2 timelines next week. Overall, it's a great episode to heighten the tension, and we're left desperately wanting to know what will happen to Gene Takovic. But that was my spoiler review and recap for Better Call Saul Season 6, Episode 11. I'm giving it a rating of 10 out of 10. But to those who have already seen the episode, what are your thoughts on all the events that went down, and what do you think will happen in Episode 12? Let me know down below in the comment section. For more videos on the final episodes of Better Call Saul Season 6, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.